It's time! Yo, what's going on, everybody? It is time again for another episode of Noon with Nem. I've been away for a while. I've been doing a bunch of other stuff, but I'm back with you. I've got a couple of new shows lined up. My camera is doing weird things, so let me fix that real quick. But today I'm here to talk to you about something I wanted to talk to you about for a while. That is Dune Part 2 by Denis Villeneuve. I think that's the way you pronounce his name. I'm going to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly. We're going to get in, we're going to hit this, and we are going to get out. But I want to talk to you a little bit about my thoughts about this film as a long time fan of the Dune series and all that has come before. So let me break it down real quick about what has come before what Denis Villeneuve has brought us. So we had the original Dune from the 1980s. Then we had the sci-fi Dune shows that were done that we did. Not only they did Dune, but they did Children of Dune, and then they did Dune Messiah. And those had their good and bad points. I know some people really like the 80s films. Some people really like the sci-fi films. I was a fan of both. I think they stuck pretty close to the source materials. Now, obviously, they were very limited on what they could do, especially in the 80s and even in the 1990s, early 2000s sci-fi short films with what they could do with effects and stuff like that. But I think they pulled it off pretty well. That said, I watched Denis Villeneuve's Dune Part 1. I quite enjoyed it. There were some choices that I thought were unusual. That I didn't agree with. But as a whole, I thought the film was beautiful. I thought it was well shot. And I thought that what Villeneuve brought us for that in Dune Part 1 was perfectly acceptable. It was his take on the world. But even with that, I thought that the choices that they made were very good. There was one part of Dune Part 1 that stood out, and it stood out for me for Part 2, and I'm going to bring it up in just a moment. Now, that brings us to Dune Part 2. I was hyped for this movie. Through 95% of this movie, I was ready to give it a giant thumbs up, and then things took an ugly turn, and that is going to be the ugly in my good, the bad, the ugly. So let's get to the good first of Dune Part 2. So Dune Part 2, the good. Denis Villeneuve continues to impress with his filmmaking. The man brought it. This film is beautiful. Once again, I think the choices that he's made in bringing this world to life, he carried them over from the first movie. Aesthetically, it continues on. I think that what he has accomplished as far as bringing these characters and this world to life on screen are great. I think that most of his casting choices were very, very, very good. I was shocked with who he cast, and I'm not going to spoil it, even though I know the movie's been out for a while, but who he cast for the Emperor, but I thought that worked. I think that who he cast as Paul Atreides, Timothy Chalamet, is awesome. I know I just butchered that name, forgive me, but I thought that he was incredible as Paul Atreides, and I thought he looked the part. Paul is supposed to be very young. We didn't get that in the 80s or even in the sci-fi version of the show. They would look like a much older Paul Atreides. But I was willing to overlook it because, they're doing what they can with what they have available. But I thought that this was fantastic. So the movie as a whole cinematic experience is great. And if it wasn't what I'm about to bring up in the ugly, and I keep teasing that, but we're going to get to it. Once again, as a Dune fan, I would have left as these two movies combining to be a wonderful experience that I hope that Denis could build on. So the bad. All right, guys, we got to discuss this. You know what? I'm apologize. This is nothing against her personally. But I thought Zendaya in Dune Part 1 and in Dune Part 2 is absolutely terrible. She's all right. Let's just let's be honest here. I don't think that she is the greatest actress in the world. I think if you keep her within certain parameters, she's acceptable, but I do not think she has the range to play a character like Cheney. Not only that, I don't think she even made the effort to play a real Cheney in this movie. Everyone in the movie is in character and is existing within the world of Dune. They are acting a part. Um, and yes, they cast a lot of characters who have interesting accents or have the appropriate look to be a Fremen or to be part of the Harkonnens or whatever else we have going on. But they also got into their parts, and it looks like they are their character. I don't agree necessarily with what they did for Fade, but the way Fade came across and how Denis presented him on screen, it was believable, and I bought it as the movie went on. Same thing when they did the character that Batista played, and I'm blanking on it for a moment. I'm sorry, I'm getting old. My brain goes out every now and then. But Raban, playing Raban as Batista, it was perfectly acceptable. It's not how I had seen Harkonnens before, but by the time I'm done with it, it was good. Now, there is one other character that sort of stood out, which was Jason Momoa in Dune Part 1. That was a little, it was sus, it was suspect. But we got some great fight scenes out of him, Duncan, Idaho. And so even though it was like a dude bro Duncan, Idaho, I'll give it a pass. But Zendaya, she seems to be always playing the same person. And what it is uninterested, disaffected American. I guess she's now a 20-something, but that's what she brings all the time. And she sticks out like a sore thumb. She really does in this movie. I never once believe that Zendaya is a Fremen, that she is Cheney, that she brings everything to the table that Cheney is supposed to bring, which I'm going to bring up in ugly because that's going to be the ugly part. But all of that. Good is Denis Villeneuve and what he did cinematically. Bad is Zendaya. The ugly also has something to do with Zendaya, but it is not her fault. And I put this on the writers, and I put this on Denis Villeneuve. Look, I understand that when you are adapting something to the screen, that you are going to make some changes for a variety of reasons. However, you cannot twist and just strangle the central theme and plot of a movie and think that longtime fans of it are going to give you a pass. I understand that people may not like what goes on with Cheney at the end of the Dune book and the other two Dune movies for a modern audience, but it is central to everything that has come before it and everything that is going to come after it for the next two books, which I'm assuming Denis Villeneuve is going to want to make into movies. What am I talking about? I'm talking about in this movie, and I'm spoiler alert, everyone, Cheney leaves Paul because Paul chooses to marry Ireland. Not only that, Paul in this movie decides to basically start the jihad and sit the Fremen on the great houses and their ships in space after the emperor refuses to abdicate his throne right away. Now, this is such a horrible misreading of the intention of both of these characters, but primarily Cheney, but even Paul, that I just can't let it pass. So let's start with Paul, because it's worth mentioning that Paul is part of the ugly as well. What they have done to Paul here. Paul is trapped. Paul has taken a path and he sees no other way. It's why later on in Dune Messiah and Children of Dune, he's talking about his son is talking about the golden path, his son Leto, and about how it's a new choice. And Leto is going to make choices that are going to be horrible. But Paul never wanted this. And his mother knew that this was a possibility. And Paul saw no other options And eventually the Fremen did this on their own. But at the end of the book, Paul has not started this jihad. And in fact, he's trapped by the jihad. He's trapped by the Fremen and their worship of him after he takes over Arrakis. And the great houses leave space because he ordered it over Arrakis. They leave the space over Arrakis and are returned to their home planet. And then the Fremen, in their zeal in believing that not only is Paul the Kwisatz Haderach, but he is also the Mahdi, they go on their holy jihad and conquer the universe. And there's much suffering. And, those are the next two books that we're going to get. So Paul is a messianic figure, but he is not one that is commanding. He's being swept along by events. And so much so that Paul makes choices that have to do with Cheney that forestall what he knows is coming, which is going to be his eventual he is going to be killed. There's going to be an assassination attempt against him and everything else. And he knows what is leading up to that. So then let's get to Cheney, because this is the big one. This is the one that really got me going. Okay, now in the book and in the previous two movies, Cheney has had a son, which Paul already, who was killed by the Harkonnen. And Cheney is, in everything but name, Paul's wife. She is his soulmate. However, she understands, just like Paul's mother did, Lady Jessica, that Paul, as the Duke, must be free to make a political marriage in order to secure safety for them as a couple, safety for the kingdom, and alliances, and to try and forestall, at least somewhat, the war that is coming. Now, it doesn't work, but at least for House Carino, it pacifies them. Otherwise, it could have been probably even worse. It would have been a much worse war. Instead, he allies with Carino and has Irulan has his wife, and Irulan's sister. She is plotting behind the scenes, and that's part of other books. However, in this movie, for whatever inexplicable reason, like I said, they have order Paul to become the active messianic figure who is ordering the jihad, and then Cheney leaves Paul. She abandons him. Not only that, and she rides off in the desert on Sandworm. Meanwhile, it is Paul, not the Emperor, who insists on having Irulan as his wife, when in the book, it is the exact opposite. Paul is reluctant, and the person who gives him the go-ahead to marry Irulan, because she knows that she will be his wife in name only, is Cheney. So Cheney plays this huge role, but it's behind the scenes role. And that's some of the greatest writing by Frank Herbert, because he's talking about power behind the scenes and about who wields actual power and everything else. So it is just amazing that they managed to change this, and they did this on purpose when there was really no need. And the only thing that I can hold on, we got a comment here. Hey, Grego, yeah, this is on YouTube as well. And the only reason I could see that they did this is that someone thought that, I hate waiting in these fights, but I got to call it like I see it. It's the girl boss syndrome. That Cheney needed to be a strong, independent woman, thinking that the only way to do that was to storm off and leave Paul, and to make Paul into this horrible figure at the end. When in fact, Paul is trapped, and Cheney is supporting everything that's going on with Paul by saying, I am content to be the consort behind the scenes who wields the real power, who has your heart, who has your love. Meanwhile, Irulan gets to be the face. She's the queen, but she will never have his children. She will never have his ear. She is there to look pretty and to walk around on his arm so that there can be some semblance of peace between House Carino and Paul's house, about between House Atreides. And so changing that changes the story so much, because everything that is going to happen in Children of Dune and Dune Messiah, the next two books, is affected by that decision. That final scene in the book Dune is pivotal to everything that comes after it. And having changed that now, they are forced, if they continue with this, to, I'm sorry, I'm going to use the word, bastardize the story. I don't know how you go from there, because Cheney's role, Cheney's eventual death, how Paul forestalled that, before, put it off as long as possible. Everything that goes along with that is central to what's going to happen leading up to Leto, their son. So, hey, you know what? Good on you, I guess, because you wanted to make Cheney look like a girl boss, but you just bastardized all of the Dune plot going forward, whether you knew it or not. And I hope they know that, and I hope it was a conscious decision, at least, because they knew the lore and decided to go that way. But as a Dune fan, I gotta call it like I see it. I think it's ugly. So the good, Denis Villeneuve's filmmaking, the effects, the beautiful cinematography, it's fantastic. The bad, I don't think Zendaya is a great actress, and I really don't think she's a great fit for this particular role, And then the ugly, what they did to Paul and Zendaya's characters at the end, just got to call it like I see it. But this has been a Noon with Nem. It is noon somewhere in the world, so don't give me any shtick about that. But I will be back. I am going to be interviewing Lorca Calcaterra soon for her new campaign for Path of Pale Rider. And I'm going to be bringing you some more good, bad, uglies, and just general thoughts on everything going on there in nerd culture. Until next time, I am out of here. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. This has been Noon with Nem.